And the Senate is expected to vote on the nomination for Richard Cordray to lead the new Consumer Protection Bureau as soon as today. Joining us now from D.C. is Democratic Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island, senior banking committee member, and thank you for joining us. Yesterday we had Senator Shelby on the broadcast, and he talked about how, of course, he's going to be voting against this nominee, but less so on the merits of the nominee himself and more so on the merits of the entire Consumer Protection Bureau. My question to you is, what are the chances he actually succeeds at that?
Well, my hope is that we can confirm Richard Cordray because he is superbly qualified. I think Senator Shelby basically conceded that. Richard was the treasurer of Ohio and the attorney general. He knows the banking industry. He also knows the law. He's a great advocate. And the problem, if we don't confirm him, is that we won't be able to not only enforce regulations against the major financial institutions, but also shadow banking institutions. So I hope we can do it. And the question, I think it's still in doubt, frankly. We're going to argue very vociferously on the floor that this is not the way to change, reform, or modify an agency that was voted for on a bipartisan basis in Dodd-Frank by simply denying its leadership. He's qualified. He should be the leader.
Right. Talk to me about sort of the dynamics behind the scenes in terms of the vote. How many votes do you have for him?
Well, our hope is we've got 60, because we'll need 60.
Right.
We're working very hard on some of the Republicans. If they choose to maintain a united front against them, then we'll have a very difficult challenge indeed. But this is, I think, an unfortunate situation. For example, we created several years ago the Federal Housing Finance Agency. It has a single director. It does not have appropriations. It is modeled very closely on the Consumer Financial Bureau. There was no controversy about putting a qualified individual in place to run it. There's still debate about its role. There's still debate about things that it has to do. But when you transfer the debate about an institutional policy to individual nominees, I think you're making a mistake.
Right. Do you think that this bureau would have been able to protect us from the failure of MF Global and all of the impact it's had on its consumers?
I think it would have gone a long way to informing consumers, but I think when you get into the situation of MF Global, it's really the primary SRO, which I believe is the Chicago CME, together with the CFTC, because this is more about the backroom operations of the organization, not what they're telling customers, et cetera. But I think that the protection that the Consumer Financial Bureau is more directly focused on is really the man and woman on the street, the mortgage loans, the payday lender, those both internet and retail operations that are essentially preying on a lot of unsophisticated individuals.
Yeah.
All right. I can find probably, Senator, I got a read from the New York Times, be totally different than this. So I want to read from the Wall Street Journal, and you can comment on this. All of which argues for a fair-minded director, not Mr. Cordray. As Ohio's Attorney General, he led the effort to squeeze billions of dollars out of large mortgage servicers, was tight with the tort bar, publicly said he wanted to seek higher political office as a Democrat. Maybe it would be, even though the president is running for re-election on a Bash the Banks platform, the country doesn't need a regulator who sees his job as punishing banks because it's popular politics. I mean, that's the Journal. I know it's Rupert Murdoch. But I
think that's the Journal, and I think what Mr. Cordray sees is protecting individuals. Let me tell you, we had a hearing about a week ago or so. We had Holly Petraeus, who's running the Service Members Bureau, which is part of the Consumer Bureau, talking about the scams that are run against soldiers, sailors, Marines now. Payday loans in which they're charged 548% APR. That type of operation is not going to be stopped unless you have a director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This is about protecting people on the streets, and you want to characterize squeezing the big mortgage companies. Those big mortgage companies, many of them failed, and many of them are the most predatory lenders in the country, causing, or at least contributing in part, to the implosion of the housing market. So we've got to get somebody there that's going to put the consumer at least on the same level as the banks. So you could make criticism of banking regulators that didn't take the steps they should have. We've got to get someone in there fighting for consumers.
Senator David Walker's here, and he has a question for you.
Sure.
Senator, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, David.
Changing the pace a little bit, speaking of mortgages, when are we going to reform Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Because that was obviously something that was left out of Dodd-Frank. The U.S. government has trillions of dollars of exposure to these government-sponsored entities that could come home to roost. And I'm just interested in what do you see as a way forward there?
Well, I think the way forward is basically three models that have been discussed by both liberal and conservative pundits. And one is a utility-type model, two is a complete privatization, and three is a situation where the Federal Housing Administration and others have some expanded but limited guarantee authorities to help the housing market. The one point that everyone seems to agree about is this current situation, any significant change to Fannie and Freddie would be even further disruptive to a very fragile housing market, and people are talking about if we were to adopt a new mode of operation, it would take probably 4 to 5 years to make the transition, simply not to disrupt the market. So my sense is that this has to be and will be one of the first orders of business of the next Congress.
Well, Senator, I agree with you. There are a number of things that we're going to have to do and we're going to have to transition, including with regard to social insurance reforms. But we need to break the gridlock in Washington. I mean, the people are just absolutely getting disgusted with the gridlock.
David, you're absolutely right. I think this is not something that's just happened the last few months. You can go back into the last Congress, where it would take us literally 3 and 4 and 5 cloture motions to extend unemployment benefits, and then we do it with 99 votes. So this was not an issue of bad policy versus good. This was just delay. And now we're seeing it even more pronounced. We've been trying to get a jobs bill here through, paid for, which has been endorsed by a wide range of individuals, which economists are talking about as adding more growth to the economy, fully paid for, fiscally responsible. And I know that's something that we have to do. And yet, the only piece we get through is the ones related to service members and veterans. We have to do more.
Senator, we have to leave it there. We could debate this all morning. Appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Still to come.